Rebecca, thanks so much for taking the time. I know we met a few weeks ago now as part of William Lee's annual retreat for the Angiogenesis Foundation. And I was just so touched by your story, but more so your reframing and the way you sort of dealt with what is a devastating diagnosis. But before we get into that element, I'd love to give our listeners and viewers a sense of you. So, who is Rebecca Devine?
Well, thanks. I'm so happy to be here. And yeah, I think first and foremost, I think of myself as a mom. I have 4 kids, and I grew up in a family with 4 kids, and it just, that's my first and foremost thing when I think of myself. And my day job, I have a design build business. We mostly do home remodeling. It's sometimes people call us the Chip and Joanna Gaines, if you know who that is in the UK, um, locally. But that's me by day. And then, yeah, like you said, I had a major event that changed my life, but really it changed like 20 years ago because
Mm,
my mom had the same diagnosis I did. And it was so shocking then, and just flipped our lives upside down and changed really who I was for so many years that I think in some ways it was why I'm better able to face my own diagnosis.
yeah, gotcha. Let's talk about your mum and that experience actually.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, my parents were really young when they met. They met in high school and they got married and had 4 kids really quickly in their early 20s. So when I was 25, my mom was really quite young, very active. I mean, no health problems. And 2 days before Thanksgiving here in the US, she was at the grocery store shopping for food for Thanksgiving to host. And um, they thought she had a stroke. And so my dad called me, horrified, shocked, rushing to the hospital. And ultimately, we found out it was a seizure because she was diagnosed with brain cancer called glioblastoma. And it was awful. I mean, it was the worst thing that had ever happened to me in my life. I mean, just because my parents were young, their parents were young. I had 4 grandparents. I don't
Mm,
think I had ever been to a funeral before my mom's, which is kind of shows a charmed life that I didn't realize that I had. It just felt normal until it wasn't. And then things were really hard. I quit my job. I took care of her. My parents ran their own business similar to what I do, Remarkably, and they needed help. So that's what I did. And unfortunately, my mom only survived 18 months.
mm,
And so it was scary. And so at my mom's funeral, I was pregnant with my firstborn, 6 months pregnant. And I kind of thought maybe in some ways this was going to save our family. I would start a new family. Everything was going to be okay. And I don't think I realized what an anxious mom I was going to become. It was
oh, really?
so scary being, I think just because it was so shocking. My mom being young and healthy and vibrant 1 minute and then things changing literally in minutes, that having a baby right after that, I don't think I'd really processed. I was so scared all the
Mm,
time. And then I ended up having 4 kids quickly. Um, and I was always worried about them. I was worried about their health, always trying to do everything I could to keep them healthy and safe. And yeah, it's only hindsight that you can see how anxious of a mom I was.
yeah. And how old was your mum when she got her diagnosis?
She was 50.
50. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And when you say, you were an anxious mom and you were trying to consciously ensure that you and your kids were as healthy as possible, what did that look like for you? What were you actively trying to do?
hmm I mean, some of it was just that hypervigilance, if I didn't have eyes on at all time, like I felt this responsibility that if I turned my back, if I wasn't there, something could go wrong. Even if grandma was with them or dad, I
Mm,
just felt like it was my entire responsibility to keep them alive for some reason. Um, and and so for a long time it was just a lot of fear, a lot of worry, a lot of, googling things like what does this mean. I remember one time, it's so embarrassing. I One of my kids fell off a chair and hit her head and threw up, and I called 911 right away. Well, she had just been drinking a bottle, just kind of, and they were kind of like, "Are you okay?"
Yeah.
So that was kind of the beginnings of my mothering, and then the what I kind of leaned into to sort of feel like there was something I could control because I needed to control something was food. So I was just really big on what I fed them, making homemade baby food, really trying, and there's always conflicting science about what you should be doing, but nursing and then just feeding my kids really well when they were little and trying to protect them from any disease or cancer.
Yeah, yeah. And do you? I know you're just talking about how you were quite hypervigilant, and as a mum, and it's only through retrospect that you actually realize the hypervigilance and perhaps the anxiety around it. But do you do you regret any of that, or do you actually think that you set your kids up for healthy relationships with food and lifestyle?
That's a good question. I regret that I didn't, for myself, that I didn't enjoy the early years as much as I
Okay.
wish I had. And maybe a lot of parents feel that way because you are sleep deprived, you are stressed. I did have, a baby, nursing and one in a sling and one running over there and hoping they wouldn't fall at the park or whatever. It was a lot. Um, but I regret that for me that I didn't enjoy them as much as I wished that I had. Maybe in the future as a grandma, I get to do that, hopefully. Um, but for them, I don't think they experienced it that way. We have a very open relationship. So I talk about that stuff with them now
Yeah.
because they're young teenagers. And yeah, so I do. I appreciate you saying that because I do feel like in a lot of ways I did set them up for success with food. They don't always make good choices. I mean, I have
Mm.
seen the Mountain Dew can in the car. I'm not going to lie. Um, but there's balance, there
Sure.
isn't going to be, I'm hoping when they go away to college, there isn't going to be this free for all because mom's not watching. I'm hoping they're like, okay, I'm going to do this naughty thing, but then they're going to be like, oh, I better eat a lot of vegetables.
Yeah, 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 yeah. There's the balance that you probably instilled in them. I mean, even from my experience, my mum was really into health. She had her own health issues actually when I was growing up. When I was about 11, my mum had immune issues, so she would suffer from idiopathic anaphylaxis, and that took her on her own health journey. And as a side effect of that, like our meals got a lot healthier. Our meals got really enriched with all these wonderful ingredients that we hadn't seen before, things like flax, linseed, and all the stuff from the health food store. And I vividly remember that experience. And I think part of that experience is what led me to the food as medicine world, sort of buried in the depths of my memories, as well as my mum being a lot more proactive with me. So I mean, from the outside, it sounds like your kids will have had some of that instilled within them, and those healthy habits that unfortunately a lot of kids just don't get
Yeah.
exposed to these days, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And in retrospect, even my sister and I were talking about this because we saw each other last week, and we grew up very much in a diet culture household.
Mm,
Um, Lots of really awful things in retrospect, of from like Slim Fast to, I don't even remember, Snack Wells, like all the fat-free stuff, like the
gotcha.
fat-free
Yeah.
chips and everything, and all the processed food, and all with good intention, but
Mhm.
really kind of reframing that for our this next generation. Not, because of what happened, there's a gift in that because heaven forbid I would have passed that on. That's definitely not healthy.
Yeah. Let's go to around that time when you were diagnosed. What actually happened at that point? There was an incident that sort of triggered everything.
Yeah, the car crash that changed my life. Um, I was at a yoga sculpt class that morning. That's what I did every morning. I don't know if you have those classes there, but it's super intense. I'm kind of like a go-go person. So it was like a way for me to do yoga on my terms, right? So it's like heated cardio, weights, and yoga all mixed together. So that's what I did every day. And that morning I was in yoga
Rebecca, I'm
class.
gonna I'm gonna just ask you a quick question
Yeah.
about that. So, because in my mind, and I'm sure the listener's mind now, we have an impression of the kind of person that you were: very healthy, proactive, exercising. Let's dive into that before we talk about the car crash, actually, because I want to give folks a sense of what your diet was like, how proactive you were about fitness and exercise, because I think this is really, really telling. Would you mind talking to
No,
us a bit about that?
yeah, absolutely. Um, ever since, my mom got sick and things moved quickly, I was really grasping at trying to do something.
Mm,
When the doctor said they couldn't, I really wanted to find something. So I remember even way back then, I found a book about a diet that could kill cancer, that could cure cancer. And I read it and I wanted her to do it. But unfortunately, her brain cancer progressed really quickly. But I myself started doing it. At that point, it was like a raw vegan diet. And,
mm,
and so I did that for a while. And then just as we all kind of know, there are all different experts out there saying what to do. So I did bounce around quite a bit, Mediterranean diet, but I was always trying to like seek out what was be the best way to eat and the best way to keep myself from getting cancer, right?
mm,
Um, Probably the stress part wasn't good, but the physical part I was doing. I was
mm,
nailing it, I think. So I was eating super healthy, lots of fruits and vegetables, bouncing around different kind of diets, but then if I look back, I can see that I was also pillar to post, go, 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 go. Super mom, start a
mm,
business, super intense fitness classes, all with good intention, but in some ways, I think that was when, in a lot of ways, I was putting my armor on, preparing for battle without knowing it. But in other ways, I can see that super intensity and that, the way that I was living with so much anxiety that I didn't recognize until it was gone. Um, that was probably a little bit of the downfall.
Okay, I have a clearer sort of picture. I don't want to make too much of a generalization here, Rebecca, but like I understand the reasons behind the intensity. Obviously, seeing what your mum had to go through, but you're super fit, you're exercising, you're trying all these different classes, you're doing a million things at once, you're running your own business, you're eating fruits and vegetables. You're generally Mediterranean, but it sounds like you bounce around from different things. When your mum was going through her treatment, did you was this like a battle with your mum? What, where you were trying to introduce some of these foods or these dietary interventions, and was there any resistance there, or was it,
There
or did it
was
just progress too fast? Just a quick one. If you want to take your health to the next level, I highly recommend you check out the Doctor's Kitchen app. It gives you hundreds of recipes that you can tailor according to your health goals, whether that's inflammation, menopause, improving your brain, increasing your heart health. There are tons of recipes that you can filter according to your dietaries and allergens as well. Click on the link down below and check out the Doctor's Kitchen app. Back to the podcast.
Yeah, a little bit at the beginning, there was resistance. I mean, when I brought it in and I was like, we're going to do this 14-day juice fast, we're going to, detoxify the body, then we're
Mm,
going to eat this certain way, we're going to eat this vegan diet. Um, I mean, I can't criticize. She had just had brain surgery. Was on dexamethasone, so she was really hungry.
mm,
And I was met with a lot of resistance. And then just culturally, I think everyone was saying, you're going to be on chemo. We're worried about losing weight. Like this
yeah.
isn't, my mom was a fit person too, and they were like, you need to eat whatever you eat. So it was
Mm,
just kind of almost force feeding, get whatever calories we can get in. And so I was met with a lot of resistance, all with good intention. And I was young, I was in my 20s, and
mm.
you know, but that didn't land,
Yeah.
not with the family.
I can imagine. I can imagine. Okay, so you maintain this fit, healthy lifestyle, irrespective of obviously what happened to your mum, because I'm assuming it's because you've seen what's happened to your mum. You want to protect yourself. You want to make sure that you're not in that position. Am I right in thinking that was part of the
Absolutely.
yeah?
Yeah, that felt like one of the primary things I could do. It was,
Mm,
insurance or whatever, way you want to look at it. But absolutely, these are the things that I can do to make sure this doesn't happen to me and my kids.
okay.
Yeah.
And sorry, yeah, I cut you off. You were just back from a class.
Oh, yeah.
What year was this? When
So this was 2018,
okay.
in February. Yeah. So I was in my yoga class, and I know I told you this at the presentation, but I remember, like, the room has mirrors across the front, and you're holding these yoga poses. And I remember I kept seeing that swirly thing that happens on your iPhone when it's trying to load an
Mm,
app, but it was like popping up all over in the mirrors. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is going on? And I mean, I just thought I'm dehydrated. I overdid it. I should sit down, check I didn't have a heart rate monitor at that point or anything, but I was like, something's up. And then, kind of passed and didn't think much of it. And then when I got in my car to drive home, I called my husband on speakerphone, and I was like, I don't feel right. And I was kind of talking to him. And then I remember the last thing I said was, I can't tell if that light is red or green. And that was the last thing I said. I mean, I can only imagine how he felt on the other end of that call. And what happened is I had a seizure behind the wheel. I went across a lane of traffic and crashed into a snowbank. That's when I'm like, okay. The only time I've
gosh.
loved living in Minnesota in February was 2018 February, because yeah, that saved my life for sure.
So the snow, the thickness of the snow.
Right, that, like, I just kinda glided through snow, and
Gosh.
until I stopped, and, because I was completely unconscious behind the wheel, which is just terrifying to think about. Yeah, so then I was picked up in an ambulance and taken to the hospital, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. I mean, all my blood tests were normal. I was healthy. Like, there was just really nothing showing up. And so, um, I was kind of like, I'm fine. I overdid it at class. Just, really thought I was, but they were like, no, this doesn't just happen to a normal healthy person. So they kept doing tests. And so they did like CT scan and MRI. They didn't see anything. They did, what's the EEG? The one that they strap all the things to your head.
EEG. Yeah.
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 So they did that, and they weren't finding anything. And then eventually one neurologist came in and was like, I'm going to do like a contrast dye MRI. And then when they did that, that's when they saw the tumor and in my occipital lobe, which is like right in your vision. So I had like,
Mm,
it was like a visual seizure when I
mm,
was driving. And so that's how they found out that I too had grade 4 brain cancer.
gosh.
Yeah.
And and what happened from then? I mean, I can't imagine the feelings, and something that you've essentially been thinking of and trying to insure against for this entire period of time. You must have felt some sense of unfairness. Like, I'm healthier much more than the average American for sure, and yet I've still succumbed to this illness.
You would think I would, right? That seems like the natural response. And I don't, this is where I feel like there's grace. There's my mom's my guardian angel. I don't know how you want to think about it. There's something bigger at play, but I didn't ever feel that way. I
Wow.
felt like, why not me? Why would I be the exception? I never felt that way. I did feel like I'm going to do this totally different. I'm going to do all the things. I'm going to find all the best, most progressive care. I'm going to fight, fight, fight so my kids can see me fight.
Mm,
Um, but I can't explain it. It really felt like it came from somewhere else, but I just felt, yeah, this sense of why not me? Okay, here we go. Let's go.
gosh, that's incredible. I mean, I mean, my initial reaction for you was like, "Gosh, this is so unfair," but like to have that foresight is it's so inspiring, Rebecca. And I guess the next question is, how did you fight? Like, what was your did you come at it with a like almost like a pre-prep game plan of like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is the strategy, or was it sort of like, where do we start from here?
There's a combination of things. I think we can't minimize that mindset that I had from the beginning, where now I look back and I say cancer saved my life, because it was like some gift of anxiety being pulled away from my body. Like that clenching the 10 and 2 of the wheel of life
Mm,
just faded away at that point. It was like, I can't operate this way. That's not the way it's going to work. But I did want to know and want my kids to see me do all the things. And I knew
mm,
I was going to be brave. So For sure, I leaned into diet. I started buying every book there was on um, brain health, cancer, diets for cancer. So I did that right away. I had two girlfriends, one who's a science nerd, beautiful little science nerd, who was like, I am going to research every, getting on the government website. I'm going to find every clinical trial. I'm going to find something out there. And so I think those are the things that we did: the mindset, the food, and then like the progressive what's out there.
Mm,
And so I saw 6 neuro-oncologists before I even started. Like, there's a 6-week standard of care that you do after your brain surgery. And I flew around. I went and saw people because I knew, they actually told me in the hospital 12 to 15 months, but I already knew what this was going to look like if I did
mm,
it kind of the standard way, what it was likely to look like. So my girlfriend found that Duke University had a polio vaccine trial, which I thought was so fascinating. I mean, there were videos about it, and this woman was flying in and getting a shot and coming back and going back about her day and like living like a normal life. And just that like first glimpse of like, okay, there's a possibility. Like, there is another side, another way this could work. And I love that it was about using your body's own immune system to fight
mm,
cancer. We all think of chemo and like, poisoning the cancer and trying not to hurt your body too much in the process. And I loved that concept in general. It just felt so futuristic and like,
mm,
I hope this is the future of cancer, not the poison, not the chemo, which thank God for it saved so many lives, but like, I hope this is the next phase of cancer treatment. So I decided that I was going to go to Duke and do that. Met with great people there. I mean, they just like exude hope, which was so nice and refreshing compared to the other places that I went that, it was like borderline hospice. Right. And so, but I wasn't, I didn't qualify. My mutations, or I don't remember exactly why I didn't qualify. So, like everyone else, they said we have to wait for a recurrence, which is sort of inevitable with
mm,
glioblastoma brain cancer, is that even though they think they got it all, and they aren't able to surgically remove it all, but I had a really good resection. But usually there's sneaky cancer cells that infiltrate beyond the borders within a few weeks or months, and or other tumors pop up. And remarkably, that's never happened for me. So, but I wasn't going to wait for a recurrence. I was like, there has to be something. There has to be something. And then they told me about, very reluctantly, where they're like, there's this one thing, but it's kind of crazy. We don't know if it'll work, but it has potential, but you have to fly to Germany a lot.
Before we
And
get to that bit of
yeah,
the story, actually, I want to give folks a sense of glioblastoma and the type of cancer it is, because
yeah,
not only is it a rare type of cancer, but it's particularly aggressive.
yes,
It's a brain cancer. Those symptoms that you first were diagnosed with are fairly common in terms of the first presentation: seizures, visual changes, loss of muscle function because of the seat of where the cancer is. But you alluded to it earlier with your mum's experience and what you were told about the treatment, that the typical survival is around 12 to 15 months, if I'm not mistaken.
yep,
And there hasn't been a stepwise change really in that survival, bar the improvements in surgical procedures to minimize side effects of the surgery. And the chemotherapy agents that we use haven't really improved survival much at all. Um, so I want to give folks a sense of just not to overly catastrophize, but it is dire in terms of the prognosis for this condition.
I really appreciate you saying that because it's so important. It's something I'm so passionate about. Um, that the standard of care treatment for this disease that is universally deadly, that's considered the Terminator by people in
Mm,
my world, um, the standard of care treatment of 6 weeks of concurrent radiation in Temodar has not changed for 30 years. It hasn't changed since my mom was diagnosed. It's
oh,
the
wow.
same. And that's really hard to witness.
Mm,
I mean, you've seen so much um, change in terms of breast cancer, for instance, and I know it affects so many more people, but I just want more attention brought to
mm,
the fact that that's the same treatment that they're offering. And not only that, but most of us have what's called there's a methylation status that they do, and my tumor was unmethylated. And it seems that most people I talk to have that same status, which means it will not respond to chemo. Yet
mm,
they say we still want to offer you chemo. And I understand that, and you I'm sure have a better understanding as a doctor. Like, you want to give everybody a fighting chance, but and we could talk about this later, but there's some concern that it causes hypermutation, that taking the chemo, if it doesn't actually destroy the tumor cells, can have, an effect in which the tumor cells continue to replicate in a way that you can't even chase after them because the mutations keep changing. um, so I really want that looked at. I want people aware of that, and I want that to change.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I appreciate you saying that as well, because it is the unfortunate state of a lot of different types of cancers, which is why, not only is your story so unique, and I want to amplify your voice as much as possible, but the possibilities within the field of cancer therapy really need to look at of these weird and wacky sort of modalities that I think will become commonplace over the next few years, just because it makes sense, and there is some preliminary data that we'll talk a little bit about a little bit later on that shows the efficacy of these new treatments. Um, and so to give folks again this idea, so you have this diagnosis, you have the contrast investigation, the imaging that demonstrates where and the size of the tumor. How quickly between that diagnosis were you rolled into neurosurgery to have the tumor removed or debulked?
Right. 24 hours maybe or less. I
Wow.
mean,
Okay.
as soon as they see it, so they don't know what kind of tumor it is. They know there's a tumor
Mhm,
until they go in and do a biopsy or a full surgical resection, which I was lucky enough to be able to have. And I had a wonderful surgeon.
mhm.
Um, when you end up in an ambulance in a hospital, you don't know, you don't get to pick your surgeon, and it's brain surgery. And I look back and I think how lucky and grateful I am for that. But that's what happens. So they see the tumor, and then they're like, well, we're going to go in and do a biopsy or remove it if we can. And then they
Mhm.
do testing to understand what type of tumor it is. And
Gotcha.
that's when I got those results back.
Gotcha. And again, just to give our UK listeners a bit of insight into the American system, because it is very different. The fact that you are able to go to different neuro-oncology clinics and actually discuss different treatment options is quite novel compared to the NHS, where we have a standard
Oh,
of care and we try and introduce uniformity in terms of how we treat conditions, unless it's quite rare. Like in the case of GBM, you may be able to find different treatments in different tertiary centres, but generally, we don't really get to shop around with the NHS unless you're going private. So, can you talk to us a little bit about how you even managed to find these different places and figure out, okay, whether they were doing anything different within the chemotherapy regime or the research trials that they were doing using different agents?
yeah. So, you know, um, we obviously have a different healthcare system here. So we have medical insurance that you buy. And then what you'll have is like in network providers and out of network providers, which then you have to pay a certain level depending on if it's in or out of network. So, I landed at the hospital that was in network, fully covered, thank God. But then, you're saving your life, right? So I then found remarkably Duke was in network, even though it's in North Carolina, half, across the country from where I am.
Yeah.
It's just strange how it works out that way. So, but then some of the like Mayo Clinic was not, which is a renowned medical center that's about an hour's drive away from me. So
Yeah.
it's bonkers how it all
Yeah.
works out. But that wasn't at that point going to change what I did. Until I ran out of all resources and money that I had and had access to from people helping me. So that's how that worked out. And so you can get online, and there's I think it's nih.gov, but it's the government like localized website that talks about all the clinical trials available by, diagnosis and where they're located and what they're doing. So we are lucky, I guess, to have that.
Mhm.
And even there, they're pretty limited because glioblastoma is one of the worst. And then, and we can talk about Germany later, but going to Germany, the laws are different in Germany. It's you pay out of pocket, but it's a
Mhm.
not for profit. So what you're paying is a lot, but it's not like I look at, the doses of things I'd be administered here in the US that say a single dose could be $15,000. Well, I didn't pay anything. I just had to pay my max out of pocket and it was covered by insurance. But then you fly to Germany and get this miraculous vaccine and you pay out of pocket, but it's nothing like that. So it's just
Mm.
so different, like you said, country to country.
Yeah, yeah, it is pretty bonkers the difference in the costs of
Yeah.
healthcare because to pay out of pocket in, like you were saying, in the US, it's exorbitant, but to pay out of pocket for the same products in Europe is far cheaper, and that's just because of the inbuilt inefficiencies within the US healthcare system, which is why the cost per capita per person is so much higher in the US. It really does need to be looked at. Because yeah, it's quite wild. So I'm glad we're talking about this because I don't think people appreciate that from the UK standpoint, just how different it is in terms of the operations and the sort of the process, but also the cost as well and the cost structure. It's yeah, it's wildly different. So during this time, you've had your diagnosis, you've had your surgery. Um, are, are you not being advised by some of these oncologists from different institutions to start chemotherapy pretty soon?
You are. They want you to start within 4 to 6 weeks after surgery, so they
Mhm.
need a little recovery time, and then so that's like your window. If they say if you go past that, then you start to risk having a recurrence or further growth or issues happening. So you have this like window.
Mm.
So a little bit of time to recover, and I mean, like it's hard for me to even think back without getting emotional because I'm so healthy now. I have no deficits. It's just miraculous. But I mean, I'd have to like hold the wall and do like a step together to get down the stairs from my bedroom into the kitchen for a while. I couldn't, and it wasn't because I didn't have anything in my motor or muscular. I don't even know the right ways of saying where the tumor was located in my brain, but just that aphasia and swelling in the brain that just kept me it was awful, right? And so I couldn't drive for a long time and I couldn't stand noise for a long time or bright lights. And so just a picture just feeling like that after being a super healthy person, navigating life like that, having 4 kids.
Mm.
I just side story that we maybe don't want to talk about, but I just had gotten divorced in January and I had this happen in February. So if that doesn't
Oh
highlight
gosh!
stress having an
Wow.
effect on your health, I don't know what does. But so I was a single mom, so to speak, of 4 kids, although my ex very much took care of the kids and they would come and visit me for periods of time. And no, and he probably didn't expect I was going to survive. I can't imagine how that felt for him. Um, but just how my life flipped upside down, right? And then here I am, and thank goodness for my girlfriends and people in my life. But I'm trying to figure out where to go. That I have to
Yeah.
hop on a plane or drive and go and meet with people, and there is no point person. I say I just got part of my brain cut out, and I have to make decisions to save my life. I'm not a doctor. I'm not even a sciencey person. I'm kind of more of an artsy person, and I have to make these decisions. I have to try to interpret all this stuff that they're telling me and decide what to do, and it's a lot. I mean, it's overwhelming. So, and you know this about me, but I really like went with intuition along the
Yeah.
way for everything because it was like this isn't something you can slice and dice scientifically and say this is the way, because
Mm.
if you could, like, it wouldn't still be a thing. People wouldn't still
Mm.
be dying, they still wouldn't be doing the same standard of care. So I felt like there had to be a different way of processing. And so and that's how I work. Right, so I was like, I'm going to use intuition to guide me through this process. So that's what I did. I During that lead up time to when they were creating that horrible radiation mask that you have to wear when they administer radiation, and getting everything ready and everything scheduled, I bounced around the country and saw the top docs.
I'm really glad you talked about this because I think it gets lost in translation, particularly when you're retelling this story that's, years and years ago. It's easy to, I think, brush over that day-to-day element of you just had brain surgery, you have residual inflammation that is going to be affecting the different areas of your motor cortex, your visual cortex. You're trying to navigate just the activities of daily living, let alone trying to decipher what you should be doing in terms of your treatment pathway, because to using your words, you don't have a point person, you don't have a coordinator, to use an NFL term, a quarterback who's going to be like, coordinating who's going where and what play you're going to be. You don't have any of that. You're just on your own.
Yeah.
Luckily in the UK we have general practitioners, but even like I'm trained as a general practitioner, but even us, we're looking after thousands of patients within a distinct population. We can't be there at the end of the phone for every single individual. I think it's miraculous that we still are able to, particularly for patients like yourself who have rare conditions, but you're navigating all this yourself, so that and trying to figure out what the best path is for you in your unique circumstances. So I'm really glad we sort of emphasized that element, because I don't want to brush over that because it's super important.
It is, and I think in trying to be optimistic and hopeful, I brush over it in my own mind sometimes, but it is really useful. It's really useful for me when I have compassion. I talk to patients all over the world all the time.
Mm,
Um, and it used to be almost, not to, I don't know if this is too big of a word to say, but like PTSD. Like I couldn't really think about my mom, or it was hard for me to talk to people because I had such a physical response. And now I have enough distance. And now, if anything, I feel almost it's my job. I have
mm,
to help people do this.
mm,
Have to help people find a different way, because yeah, we are lost. We're meant to do all of this on our own. And maybe you have a partner, maybe you have siblings close by, or parents, or whoever. I really didn't, because I always say the mom must be the glue of the family, because after our mom passed away, even though my parents were high school sweethearts, or maybe because my dad really quickly got remarried, had a new family, did his own thing. My siblings, my three siblings, moved to where their partners' families were. So they would have grandparents in the picture, understandably. So
mm,
my family's all over the place. And yeah, so they came in and, for a day here, a couple days here. My sister came twice for several days and took care of me. She's amazing. But mostly I'm trying to navigate these huge, literally like life or death decisions
mm.
on my own.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm glad you had me really think about that again. Just to be clear, I did do the initial 6 week standard of care, the concurrent radiation and chemo,
Mhm.
called Temodar. I did
Okay.
that, and they were very emphatic that you do this standard of care, no matter what your methylation status is, or you will not be eligible for any clinical trials.
Okay.
So I did that 6 weeks. And then by that point, I had started looking at different things. And when I started leaning into the immunotherapy idea, I really was starting to have trouble with the thought of doing a year of high dose chemotherapy. And that's the second portion of standard of care. And that's the part that I didn't start talking about until maybe a year ago, that
Mm.
I didn't take it. I hid it in my room.
Okay. Okay.
um, I was scared of what my medical team would do if they knew I didn't take it,
Mm,
and I knew they wouldn't advise me not to take it, because they have to be consistent with what they say to do. But I had this like strongest gut feeling. I mean, and some people are like, well, nobody wants to take the chemo, like it's terrifying, and I get that, but it was different than that. It was
mm,
like, if there was a movie about it, it would like, something would fling it out of my hand. It was such a strong feeling that I was like, I can't do it. I just cannot do it. And I think too, I knew the way the story was meant to go, or was
yeah.
likely to go. So I had to do something different. Whichever way it went, that was the only way I could kind of live with myself. And I think too, so often, and this might sound weird, so take it or leave it, but you see other people telling the story about someone with cancer, especially brain cancer, and depending where it is in your brain, that maybe be. But I wanted to tell my own story for as long as I could, and I wanted to be the director of my own story for as long as I could. That was so important to me. No matter what happened, I wanted it to be me until the end. So it was really important for me to feel like I was making some choices, and that made sense to me.
Yeah. I, I think sometimes, particularly as medics, we get um, whipped up into groupthink with regards to um, guidelines and uniformity. And I appreciate there is as a medical doctor myself, there is 100% a reason why we use evidence based medicine, and there is obviously clear reasoning as to why we should be following guidelines. But within the realm of what you're what you what you were going through, because the stakes are so high and the treatment that's being offered is so poor, that there should be sort of an allowance for experimentation within, safe guardrails. And I think there is a bit of cognitive dissonance when it comes to thinking outside of these guidelines within the medical establishment, for fear of retribution, which is genuine.
Mm.
There's a lot of litigation, um, but also, what you were talking about in terms of using high dose chemotherapy in the knowledge that there is potential for harm, in the knowledge that median survival, so the average survival is so low, um, we still push on with certain medications because it's unacceptable to do nothing or to offer
Right.
something else. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And I think we need to sort of challenge that. And it takes brave people like yourself who are open now about your own experience to start that conversation, and to explore other avenues, because otherwise we just sort of toe the line. And like I said, I'm not trying to suggest that everyone should just create their own
Right.
sort of process, their own pathway or whatever, but I think within the realm of what we're talking about today, like a cancer that's aggressive, has a very, very short median survival, we need to explore other avenues.
I think that's so well said. I had fear for myself initially about talking about it, like I said, but I also was very fearful about talking about it even on social media and things
Yeah.
for two reasons. One being, I don't want anyone to think I'm an expert telling them what to do or not to do. Two, if you already took the chemo and you're battling this, I know that can be very triggering.
Mm.
You don't want to hear somebody say, I did this wrong, or I gave this to my child or my partner. And I want to emphasize, like, I'm a rule follower. Like, I grew up very much like doctors are on a pedestal. What they say is God's word, right? Like, it is the truth, what you do. And it wasn't until this happened in my life that I felt very differently. And of course, that's so much I think of my mom being with me in some sense, or her story being carried with me, because when you really think about it, they're saying this is not going to help you, but you should still take it, and you know how toxic it is. It makes a lot of sense, but old me never would have ignored that advice. But this new version of me was the brave version, I guess, and that's why I want to put it out there, not to trigger people, not to tell people what to do and not to do, because absolutely not, but just to get the conversation going for people to feel like, again, that they have some say in their own story and their own way of fighting this, because
Mm.
yeah, that's the only way we're going to move the needle, is if people start doing something different.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. And on that note of doing something different, let's go back to Germany. So, so you're told by someone was it someone at Duke who
Yeah.
mentioned that to Dr. Saskia? Tell us
Yeah.
about that moment.
Yeah. So my doctor at Duke, only ended up seeing him a few times, but my favorite thing, and I have to say this because I think it's really important. I think he's from Australia, so he's this accent too. It's I guess you probably think I have an accent, and I think you have an accent, but he's just so charming. And he was like, this thing might never come back, right? And I was like, what? I mean, no one had ever said that to me, ever. And just I don't think you can underestimate. And I hope like he sees this or hears that sliver of hope from a doctor. Like I had my own
Mm,
slivers of hope, and they might have felt woo woo or whatever else you think, but a doctor, like a neuro oncologist that said that to me, just was a little shift, a little nudge. And he's the same doctor who told me about Dr. Saskia.
oh wow.
So I am so grateful for that. I'm so grateful that I got to connect with Dr. Saskia Biskup in Germany. And you've met her. Like when I met her, I mean, she's my hero, right?
Mm.
She is something else. She is a gift to this world. And I just like I felt with the chemo, I had this like intuitive sense. And again, might sound really woo woo, but you know what? I'm going with it. I'm still here
Mm.
7 years later. She's it. This is it.
Mm.
This is what we're going to do. I mean, she is amazing. Her whole life is this, right? I'll be like, are you going to go skiing? Are you going to take vacation? I don't take vacation. My husband has to threaten to leave me if I don't take a day off because this is all I want to do. This is who she is as a person. This is her whole life is trying to save people from cancer. She's amazing. So when I met her and she explains things, and when she explains it and draws it out on a piece of paper, I understand exactly what this peptide vaccine is that is going into my body. And it makes so much sense. And I leave the room and somebody else asks me to just, please don't ask me to tell you how it works. Please, please don't. You can tell me again. Like I get it, but there's no way I could explain it. But it was like, oh my God, I'm training my own body to make T cells against tumor mutations. This is insane. This is amazing. This is the future. So I'm getting excited. But I knew it was her. I knew this was gonna work. And it was gonna take like 6 months to make this vaccine. It was like 11 months after almost a year after
Oh,
diagnosis that I
11
got my
months.
first dose,
Wow.
which is
Okay.
really scary, right? Because
Yeah.
after that 6 weeks of standard of care, which then is nudged, so let's say 3 months. So there was like 7 months that I didn't do anything.
Gosh.
Um, so during that time, and I don't know if you want me to talk about this now, that's when I really leaned into food and I decided to do a ketogenic diet for that period. I just felt like I had to do something like more than just eat more fruits and vegetables. I felt like I had to do something drastic. I had to feel like I was doing something. So I did that. And then she also offered up the opportunity if my doctors here in the US would support it to get it's called an uptake inhibitors infusion. So like
Mhm.
Keytruda. So I did do those infusions for about a month before I got my vaccine, and I would do those every 3 weeks. And then I did it for the first year and a half that I was getting the vaccine in Germany.
Okay.
And this is all about boosting your immune system, like turning it on like hyper speed, right? To the fact that I have a little bit of autoimmune after, totally worth it. I call it a normal person problem with my thyroid.
Mhm.
But and that's at that point when they're like, okay, this can start to hurt your organs. We have to stop with the Keytruda. But I mean, I just knew this is like immune, I'm not a doctor, I'm not like you, but I knew immune system, anti-inflammatory, turmeric, fruits and vegetables, anything that was immune boosting. And then, like I said, for a while, I did the ketogenic diet, but that's what I was doing while I was waiting for her to, you know, cook up this miraculous vaccine to give to me.
Gosh, okay. I've got so many questions. So, so you go to Germany, you meet
Hmm.
Dr. Saskia that we're hoping to have
Hmm.
on the podcast soon, to explain a bit more about how she even got to the peptide vaccine technology in the first place. But you meet her. Did you have to, in the same way, you were having to demonstrate to the different centers in the States that you were an eligible participant for a study that she was doing, or were you outside of the realm of a clinical trial and they were still doing sort of quite early stage experimentation?
Right. So by the time I had met with her, she had been doing it for 5 years. So it
Okay.
wasn't super early stage, but early. And there was no restrictions in terms of what I was doing in the US that would affect my
Okay.
ability to be eligible for what she was doing in Germany. But because she's Saskia, like she will determine from your tumor mutations, because you have to do like genetic sequencing on the tumor to get a
Hmm.
profile and understand which mutations you have,
Hmm.
if you're likely to respond. And if you're
Hmm.
not, she's not going to waste your time or your money. She's going to say, this isn't likely to work for you.
Hmm.
And hopefully if she had any other suggestions, try a trial for this or this. But that was the only requirement, was that I was going to meet some threshold of there being a possibility for me to be a responder. If I'm going to
Okay.
fly there, put everything in that basket, all the things, she wanted there to be some likelihood that it would work.
Okay. I'll talk a little bit about the vaccine in a second. At that first meeting, perhaps afterwards, when they got the sequencing, I imagine from your initial doctors who had resected the tumor in the first
Yeah.
place, did she give you an indication that it was actually going to take 11 months, or was that sort of something that you only came to know a couple of months into the process with her?
Yeah. So, and to be fair, and it's faster now, but it didn't take quite that long because I finished the standard of care and then I started the process. And, so probably the actual creation of the vaccine maybe took 6 months. But,
Okay, sure.
but no, I didn't know that. I didn't, because I had to, I mean, it's quite expensive. So I did some crowdfunding, raised some money. I really had to make a determination if this is what I was going to do. A lot of
Mhm.
factors with kids and flying to Germany, every month, and a lot of things. So, um, but but I was kind of surprised. Like, I kept kind of checking in, like, do we have a date yet? Back then,
Mm.
and kind of didn't realize that it was going to take that long. And that could just been me not hearing it, or just that it wasn't really talked about at that time. So I just tried to kind of not worry too much and just do what I could do until it was ready.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Because again, this gives us even more of an insight into like how nerve-wracking it must be in the knowledge that recurrence is a clear possibility. The survival rate is already low. You've opted not to go for the high dose chemotherapy as part of standard, um, and you're sort of waiting on this European scientist who seems like lovely and like super passionate, but they're taking a little while, and so
What's happening up there? So I'm still getting monthly MRIs back then, which gives you, you have 4 weeks of panic and then a little like, okay, I'm good.
okay.
Um, I I can't remember exactly. I know I had moments of pure fear. I'm sure I cried myself to sleep many a night, but yeah, I think that's part of why, like I said, I did the ketogenic diet, because that's hardcore. There's a lot that goes into that,
Yeah,
especially doing
let's
it the
talk
way
about
I
that.
did. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I mean, you're probably going to be better about talking about it than I am, but my recollection, because it's been 5.5 years since I did it, is it's like 80% of your calories need to come from fat, right?
Mm.
And so that's like total reversible, especially in like the 90s, right? So the thought of that, and then to get into ketosis, where I'm monitoring my glucose levels and making sure that I'm in ketosis, took a while. And it was a drastic change in the way that I was eating. And then also, I really wanted to eat real whole foods. So there are a lot of kind
Mm.
of gimmicky things, because it was like a fat loss diet that was just starting. The good part of that is, in the grocery store, there were things labeled keto, which was kind of nice. But I really didn't want to eat a lot of processed foods. So it was tricky. I was eating a lot of eggs. At first, I was eating a lot of meat, and I was like, I can't eat this much meat, but nuts, avocados, coconut oil. I was doing the bulletproof coffee with the MCT oil, which is like coconut oil or ghee, and every morning, and doing the intermittent fasting for 16 hours. And just like that, at least preoccupied my mind and kept me doing something during that
Sure.
time.
Yeah, yeah. And look, no judgment whatsoever. Like I think in those moments of desperation, you will reach for whatever you can get your hands on in terms of a slither of hope. And I think there are cases where ketogenic diets are useful in these scenarios. And I think glioblastoma has been one of them that has sort of been elevated to the realm of it possibly helping, but obviously it's very hard to do, like you alluded to. And I think a lot of people fall into the trap of thinking they're doing a ketogenic diet, and actually it's quite high protein. Because to do a
Yes.
ketogenic diet properly, like they do for kids with treatment refractory epilepsy, and we've actually talked on the podcast with a dietitian who's one of the only registered dietitians in the UK, qualified to prescribe ketogenic diets for children, it's really hard because you're going to maintain such a high fat intake without having carbs and protein. And so a lot of people end up relying on like cream and butter and oils. And, it's not something that people who are otherwise quote unquote, don't have anything else going on, or like, of cancer diagnosis or an active cancer, it would be like a really unhealthy way of eating, and quite
Right.
a hard thing to maintain. And it's interesting you were doing the testing as well. Was that urine ketones, or were you doing lactate? Blood ketones.
So you might have a picture of me now. I was doing all of them. I was testing my urine every time I went to the bathroom at home. I had a thing next to it. I had the
Okay.
breath one. I
Wow.
had I
Okay.
had all of them because
Okay.
that's
Gotcha.
just, so I'm like, "Oh, I was way less anxious. Okay, maybe I wasn't." That's what I was doing. But
Okay.
I really appreciate what you're saying. I think there is a lot of scientific talk about the possibility of it being a real scientific intervention. It's
Yeah.
not just kooky. There are some actual GBM trials with keto.
Mm.
So I don't think it's necessarily been decided that this is or isn't helpful yet, but it is a real scientific concept. And what I like to tell people when I talk to people who call me for help or advice, and again, I'm like, I'm just a patient, not a doctor,
Mhm.
but as a therapeutic intervention, not forever. I think it might be a really good possibility, especially if you're eating real food. Um, and also to make sure you're really in ketosis.
Yeah.
Like, don't eat just a high fat diet, or especially a high fat, high carb diet.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that affects your cholesterol and all these other things, but you don't want to do it and not even be in ketosis. You have to be testing. You have to make sure you really understand how to determine net carbs and all of the things and really do it right.
Yeah, it's a lot of homework. It's a lot of
Yeah.
homework to do. And I think, in this realm, without sounding like I'm promoting a keto diet for everyone, I think it's kind of like the wild, wild west where there's a lot of unknowns. And if you want to be on the safer side, then you wouldn't do a ketogenic diet. You would just maintain a normal, healthy diet, ensure that you're not losing weight, and you're not eating too much sugar or ultra processed food. I think that's probably the standard. If, and it sounds like you're in this camp, you want to be super proactive, or at least give yourself the sense that you're being proactive, you want to do something with diet, then it is a viable option if you do it properly. Whether or not this is actually going to help, whether or not it helped you, I think it's like impossible to say at this point. But like you said, there are trials going on specifically with GBM. There are anecdotes of people who have done ketogenic diets with GBM and improved them. Who knows what kind of subtypes they were of the tumors, whether a specific type, was it a germline mutation, a somatic mutation, who knows? There's just so much, like I said, it's the wild, wild west out there. But I want to give people, a true reflection of your experience and a true reflection of what you did, because I think it's these stories that inform trials going forward, and actually, the best practice in 10, 20 years to come.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think it's interesting. And I don't know if it's relevant, but when you said germline mutation, and part of my experience was discovering a germline mutation between me and my mom, which
Gotcha.
I know a lot of people, and I know there's Stanford's doing a study now on the glio gene, and they're really trying to figure this out. But for me, the mutation that we both have usually shows up as colon cancer.
Mm.
So once I kind of understood that, I really kind of shifted my perspective and kind of like, okay, if I'm feeling really lousy on this keto diet, I really wanted more fruits and vegetables and fiber. At some point I was like, I think this maybe isn't the best bet for my body, and that's where I say intuition, or that it's so personal, but if I'm having these symptoms, digestive symptoms over a long period of time, I'm like, can this really be good for me? I know my gut microbiome is important. I know just good digestion is important because I don't want to now get colon cancer. So it is very personal, but just trying to really, I think, you talk about this, and Willie talks about this, but it's food as medicine, but it's food and medicine. And just just knowing what foods can help support the medicine you're taking. Maybe if you eat really healthy, you can avoid or eliminate a medicine that you were taking, which is amazing.
Mm.
Just as a booster, as something, and just as a mindset for me. As you know, it was just a tool for me to feel like I was doing something, and that I tried back with my mom because I wanted to do something. It's something I could control. A doctor didn't need to prescribe it. I could do it myself. I mean, at one point I was reading medical medium and I was drinking celery juice. Like, I mean, when there's all these conflicting expert advice out there, and you're trying to save someone's life or your own, you are going to, it's something that you're going to grasp at anything. But I was like, this isn't going to hurt. Start my morning with that. Then my bulletproof coffee. And then I'll do that. And I was doing all kinds of stuff, but
Yeah.
some combination must have worked, or maybe didn't, but at least it didn't knock me out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I want to give people a true reflection of that, and just to confirm to the listener, because we're banding around like some medical terms there. So, germline mutation are mutations that you find in reproductive cells, so like the sperm and eggs, and that's essentially what you inherit from your parents. And somatic mutations are mutations within sort of body cells, like your organs, skin, muscle, and that can be from exposure, like UV radiation, for example. So that's the difference between germline and somatic mutation. So let's go back to Germany. So you now have the peptide vaccine. It's been created, and actually, so this is the paper I'm just holding up for folks watching on YouTube, which you're one of the patients. Am I correct? You're one of the
Yes.
173 patients that was in this paper looking at what's titled "A Real World Observation of Patients with Glioblastoma Treated with a Personalized Peptide Vaccine." And the idea around this vaccine is to essentially get an idea of what mutations there are in your specific tumor, generate peptides from that tumor that can prime your own immune system to recognize the specific peptides in that tumor and mount an immune response from your own CD8 and CD4 cells, so your own immune cells. So essentially, it's a vaccine you get given. It tells your immune system, hey, there's a few proteins here you got to look out for, and when you see these proteins, you attack. I'm massively simplifying it here for the listener, but it's
For
actually
me.
useful for me to think about things like this way as well, quite honestly.
Yeah.
And they do all sorts of tests as well to determine whether you are a true responder as well. I believe in these 170 odd patients, 90% of folks actually responded, so they actually mounted an immune response. But that's generally how it works. The and so yeah, so now we know what the peptide vaccine is. What was the first experience when you were told, all right, come back to Germany, got to give you this jab, and what did they tell you about the frequency and how often you were going to be having these?
Yeah, so the first time that you go, they do like a booster phase where they do 4 days of appointments and injections over 10 days.
Mhm.
Um, and they draw your blood before you start, and then they drew it again at the end of that 10-day period. And then I would go monthly because they can only make a certain amount with the tumor material they have. I think they were able to make 14 for me. Um, so I did that, and then I would go again the next month, and then at 3 months they then start doing what they call immune monitoring, where they
Mhm.
do it. My understanding is in like a petri dish, and see if you're starting to create the T cells to respond to the
Mhm.
mutations, and then they give you a report on that. And my response was good, and it continued to be good to the point where they're like, let's push to 3 months, because a, save the money and the time of travel, but B, to not use them up too quickly. It's just that trying to walk that fine line between keeping your I don't know, your immune system ready to attack these invaders and these mutation cells, and also making those doses last. So
Mhm.
did that over the period of about 15 months, and then the pandemic hit. And being in the US, I mean, the international borders were closed. I even if I could have gotten a medical exception to go, I was terrified of what if they don't let me back in?
Yeah.
What happens if I get sick over there? I have 4 kids here. So for a year and a half, I didn't go. I
Wow.
just continued doing what I was doing here. Um, and that's the point that I stopped doing the keto diet too, because I just didn't feel so good on it. And I'm like, I'm not really doing anything. So I went more Mediterranean, tons of plants, fruits and vegetables, anti-inflammatory foods, and just kind of hoped I was like boosting my immune system, and keeping it going. So then finally I was able to go back as soon as the borders opened. I was like on that first flight back to get a dose, and they drew my blood, and I was still having a good response. And that was, oh, I can't, I mean, that was such a gift. It was amazing. And so I was like, okay, whatever I'm doing, whatever she did, something's working. And at that point, we decided to spread them out and do 6 months, and then we did 9 months. And now I go annually to keep them going as long as I can.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I completely forgot about the COVID spanner in the works there, from your story, because gosh, that would have been awful. You know, you have the, the medication that is working, the vaccine on one side of the world, but then to go get it, you risk not being able to come back and see your family,
Right.
and getting stuck out there, and potentially getting sick, or I mean, gosh, what a whirlwind of emotions.
I know. It's been kind of a roller coaster looking back. Yeah.
That's
So now
incredible.
I'm just like, it's so normalized. Like, I'm just going to Germany, getting my shot. Maybe I'll zip over and see my sister for a few days. And it's just crazy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because your sister lives in Germany as well. So
She lives in
different.
the Netherlands, but it just seems
Okay.
so close. I mean, I feel like it's like state to state in the US, right? Like I could just take like a Eurowings for an hour, and it just seems way more accessible.
Yeah.
Same
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
zone.
That
Yeah.
that's how we feel being so close to Europe.
Yeah.
And just to sort of clarify for the listener, and I'll probably go through this paper in a lot more detail with Dr. Saskia and some of her scientific colleagues, but on average, according to this, I don't know whether you got shortchanged or maybe you were like quite early, but the average time to create the vaccine was actually 3 to 4 months. So yours was double the amount of time. And they generally create a whole bunch of peptides, and they whittle it down from 3,000 peptides down to about 20. And there is a process for choosing those particular peptides. I'm not too sure about the spacing out of these peptides and these peptide vaccines, and how they came to the conclusion of, okay, this person gets them once a quarter, this person can go annually, but the increase in survival, compared to standard care, is pretty remarkable. I'm looking at some of the statistics and some of the hazards ratios, and they're not something that you see in a slightly better chemotherapy. They are a massive jump forward in terms of survival. I'm imagining you know some other patients on the vaccine as well. Did you have like a community that you were connected to?
Yeah, I'm connected via social media to a GBM community as a whole,
Okay.
but because I've been so vocal on socials about what I've done, I've had so many people reach out to me from across the world. I've talked to so many amazing people. I Tom Parker from the UK, rock star. I talked to him several times, and unfortunately, and this is the other reason I just want to get out in front of this for people is that you can't wait. And that's what's hard because you're making this decision by yourself. Your doctors are like, just wait and see if you have a recurrence. You feel, you do the standard of care, you're doing something, you don't have recurrence, you feel like your old self. A lot of us do again. We think we're fine. And then by the time the recurrence happens, and then they kind of kick into high gear, and then they start doing, there's several other options that they bring in, like Avastin, or I don't know how you say the lamostine or something. Like there's just different things that I see
Yeah.
people doing um, to try to help. I feel like that's when people decide, okay, I'm going to reach out and look at one of these vaccines. There's a couple other ones in Germany. I don't know
Mhm.
anything really about them. I just know my own. Um, and and then unfortunately, because it does take 3 or 4 months to make, that by then it can just really be, I hate to say too late, but I'm just going to say that. And and then maybe they're not well enough to travel, or even if they are and they go, it's just like you're chasing something that's growing faster than you can catch up,
Yeah.
and so that's part of why I want to be very vocal, so people just generally know there are other options if they want them. And if
Mm.
I mean, I've talked to so many young mothers. You think of, and maybe you do or you don't, but I think everyone kind of thought of it as an older man's disease, like 70-plus-year-old men. And I mean, pregnant women, I do think stress can be like an activator of a kind of dormant mutation sometimes, because I had, what happened to me, the holidays are a known stressor. People will have,
Mm.
like, I know heart attacks increase a lot around the holidays. Like there's something that can trigger something to just start to, that's what I always think is like a tipping point, right? Like we're fighting cancer all the time, but something, so, or like a hormonal change or an illness, can I have a daughter with celiac disease, and we both got super sick many years ago with just a viral infection, but after that she got it, and I think that there's
Mm.
something, and that way better than I do, but that happens there. And so young moms, that are pregnant or have little kids, and they're women in their 20s. I talk to all different, and so these are the ones especially that I'm like, you got to fight. You've got to try to crowdfund, try to reach out, see if you're eligible for this. And then the more people that do it and the better the results, the more likely this will be, an international opportunity for people and in clinical trials. And yeah, I know Saskia can only help so many people. She's one person and she has a wonderful staff and team, but this has to keep growing. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. And I think what I find so unique about your story is your ability to straddle both worlds of you want to lean in on, conventional medicine, allopathic medicine. You want to trust the science, you want to, lean into the new innovations, but you also want to be guided by your intuition and you want to explore as well. And I
Yeah.
think, just looking at your diet, I know you sent me a description of your keto regimen via email. It's 16 hours of intermittent fasting, testing for ketosis, nuts, avocado, salmon, coconut, heavy cream, all that kind of stuff. But your diet was in flux because when you felt that that wasn't serving you, so this is something that you did whilst you're waiting for the vaccine, then you moved to a Mediterranean diet, which is going to be full of lots more fiber, lots more anti-inflammatory vegetables and fruits. These are actually going to be supporting, and I don't know whether you were thinking this at the same time, but you know and this is pure speculation from me here, but when you're introducing those kind of ingredients into your digestive tract, you are supporting your microbiota, which is where your immune system lies. And if you're having a vaccine that is stimulating your immune system and you're also supporting that microbiota where your immune system lies with foods, then it's your diet is serving you at a different stage in your journey. Whether or not that had an effect or not, I cannot say. No one can say, but it just stands to reason to me that it was the right sequence of diets rather than the other way around. Let's say, not that there's anything wrong with having fruits and vegetables. Uh, prior to um, uh, prior to having vaccines. So yeah, I think it's really important to be aware of the that diet can flux, and it's not a one size fits all for an individual, and it's not a one size fits all for your entire life. I think it can
Yes.
change.
I'm so glad you said that, because sometimes I would, because I did change, feel like maybe I didn't really know what I was doing or doubt myself, because it's a lot easier sometimes to have a plan and follow the rules,
Yeah.
right? Than to have to continue to trust your gut, trust your instincts, and continue to research. But even just recently, I had been, Mediterranean, then I started reading Walter Longo. And then I started thinking, oh my gosh, if I want to not only beat this, but I want longevity, then I was like, I'm going full plant based. So then I did that for a while, for like a year. And then I started feeling like I was having some muscle loss, and I'm now in my 40s and there's different things there. So I even reached out to my new friend, Dr. William Lee. And I was like, hey, I know you're busy, but what do you think about meat? And he was like, you absolutely should be eating meat with all the exercise that you're doing. And just talk that through with me a little bit. And I thought, you know what, that's really what it is, right? It's not digging in your heels and saying, this is the way that I eat. I mean, I understand there's ethical implications to plant-based eating. That's a different story, or
Sure.
religious or other things. But if you're doing it for health, it's going to have an evolution. It's going to change with different phases of your life, different goals. And that was a little tricky for me at first because it was a lot easier if it was just the rules and I just follow the
Yeah.
rules and I do the thing. And now I'm just really, yeah, trying to be open minded about, okay, this needs to shift a little bit. It's not working for me anymore. Just like when my gut was screaming at me from, the keto diet after a while, it was like, okay, this can't be good for me long term. Um, Same thing where I was like, why am I losing? Like I used to have really ripped arms and I don't have them anymore. I know it's aesthetic, but it's also saying like I must be losing muscle, right?
Yeah.
And maybe not eating meat isn't the best thing for me. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I your story is just so inspirational on so many different levels, Rebecca. I don't want to discount the mindset, and then this is something I asked you about when we were at the retreat. Actually, after
Yeah.
you'd given us what was an incredible motivational talk about you basically compressed I mean, I know we've compressed it now into like just over an hour, but you compress your story into a few minutes, and I know there was just so much more that I wanted to unpack with you. So I'm really glad that we had this opportunity today. But the mindset and your resilience and how you were able to reframe during your journey, I think is so inspirational. I think this is one of the big areas that perhaps I don't pay enough attention to on this podcast and also in the research that we do at Doctor's Kitchen. Um, I'd love to talk a bit about this and what things that you did, as kooky as they might sound to other people, that you felt may have helped you on your journey. If you can't explain it biologically, that's totally fine. But I'd love to dive into that a little bit if that's okay.
Yeah. Thank you. I do. I feel like I would have times in my life where I would just feel like I needed to make a decision and I would just sort of be like begging the universe for guidance. Um and there are several times along my path where when I really asked for it, and I know you're friends with Dr. Tara Swart, right? Is it, am I saying her name right?
Yeah, yeah.
I
Tara is a good
listened
friend
to
of
a
mine.
podcast with her and just being like into neuroscience and it wasn't purely woo but talking about like this stuff, it really helped me to think like, okay, I'm really going to try this. What's it going to hurt, right? It's like what's eating extra arugula going to do to hurt? How's that going to hurt me? um so just her idea of manifestation, and there was something very specific I was trying to manifest, and I loved it. It was like a concrete 3-step process, and I followed the 3 steps, and it was something for my other job. So that but it worked, like immediately worked. And I was like, what is happening? What is happening? And then I had some other times where I felt like I had to make a decision about my health. And so I just was like, okay, I just would get quiet. I have a space in my basement where I do meditation. Um, put on my manifestation music and sit and meditate for 10-15 minutes. And remarkably, I would either come out with an answer. This is where I started to feel really called to lean into doing some of this work towards helping people with cancer. Um, but also, the story that I love to tell is I was really trying to make a decision on something specific, and I asked the universe. I said, it's my mom's birthday. It's April 22nd. It's my mom's birthday. I said, I need to know if this is the right thing. Can you just give me a sign? And this is where it feels woo, I know. But so anyway, I just went in, I did my meditation, I asked the universe for a sign. And then I got in the car. I was driving my daughter to a basketball tournament in Milwaukee. So it's like 4-hour drive. And we're almost to the hotel, but we decided to like veer off to the grocery store to get her some snacks. And I was like, oh my God, do you see that sign? And there were 2 buildings attached to each other, and one in huge block letters said Dana, which is my mom's name, Dana. And the one next to it was like molecular cell
No.
something. It was I don't even I wish I should have looked at the picture before. I can't
Yeah.
even remember what it was. But so we like did a U-turn, went back
Oh
over,
my
and I
gosh.
like pulled in front and made her take a picture. And I was like, okay, that's a sign. Oh, and before I did that, I was like, it's my mom's birthday. I'm like, I want a sign from my mom. But I said, like, you have to say it out loud, go to my little place. I don't want a cardinal. I don't want a cardinal. I don't want a hummingbird. I don't want some universal sign. I want something from my mom. It's her birthday. And then I
Yeah.
got that and I was like, holy cow. So a few days later, I came back and I met up with my girlfriend to go for a walk because she too, like you, was a medical doctor, still a medical doctor, but had a practice. And she decided to switch gears. And she's now like a life coach for doc moms because there's a mental health crisis with mom docs. And it's very important to her. She's amazing. And so I just wanted to talk to her about switching my career path and some thoughts that I had about starting a podcast because she has a podcast. And we were going for a walk and I was telling her this whole story. And I'm not kidding you. She grabbed my arm and pulled me, and I almost stepped on a dead cardinal. And I was like, oh my God, did I like just like piss off the universe? Like by saying, don't send me a cardinal? Oh my God, that is really scary. And then I like came home and I'm like, is this a bad sign? Am I going to die? Like, what did I just do? I made somebody really mad. And then a few days later, because I'm like really trying to get my 10K steps in, I was out for a walk and on my driveway, there was a dead cardinal. And
No.
like you cannot miss a like cardinals are bright red, and I've never seen a dead cardinal in my life. And then I started to really think like I did something really bad. Like I don't know, like I don't know what I said or what I did. But then I kind of started looking it up and there's some traditional thoughts about, that just means the end of something and the beginning of something new. And I'm like, I'm grabbing onto that. That's what it is. And so that just kind of helped me discern that, I'm not giving up my other business and my husband's taking over more of that. And I'm really leaning more into helping people with cancer. But I could talk to you about this for 45 minutes. There's so many stories, but it's crazy that when you do that, it works. It really works. And I need to get back to doing it again because then I get busy and check my boxes, but it's pretty amazing. And then you feel loved and cared for. And whether you believe in God or whatever you believe in, I believe I'm here for a reason. I believe my reason very well could be just that I'm getting everyone in the world to Saskia because she's the hero of the story. I don't know what my reason is. I don't need to know it. That's not my business, but it makes me feel like, okay, I'm on the right path. I'm going to be okay. Whatever that looks like, I'm going to be okay.
That's incredible. Honestly, it gives me goosebumps, and I wasn't there to see the dead cardinal, but I know from just having chats with Tara, um, both on and off the pod, like we chat all the time. Um, it there's something there, and it's quite awkward to sort of vocalize it publicly as a medical doctor because obviously we just don't have the science or whatever. But there's something within the quantum world, the energy coming together or something, the traditional sort of woo-woo explanations. There's something there, and it's unexplainable. But like you, I lean into it, and if the universe gives me signs, then I perk up. I don't ignore it, and I think that even if at the bare minimum it gives you a sense that you are being listened to by a higher power, whatever it might be, and it encourages a positive mindset, we know that that has a genuine impact on our biology in all
Yeah.
different areas of medicine that's been proven. So hang on to that belief. And I really feel that because cancer, and I'm saying this as empathically as I can because I'm fortunate to have not suffered it personally, but because it robs you of so much of your control, your identity, the locus of things that you can do, like if you can at least maintain that sense of mindset and reframing and the story you tell yourself, it can serve you in so many different ways. And I think you have really embodied that. So, gosh, I really appreciate you telling us your story, Rebecca, and I just I'm super excited to share this with as many people because I feel that I want to, like I said earlier, I just want to amplify your voice and your energy as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. It's been so fun getting to know you a little bit.
If you want to learn to recognize the health foods that are actually quite unhealthy, I would check out this video right here.